Scroll disclaimer. This story is a fictional emotional narrative that explores complex and sensitive topics, including emotional boundaries, blurred relationships, and infidelity. It is intended for mature audiences and aims to provoke thought and conversation, not to glorify or encourage inappropriate behavior. Any resemblance to real people, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Viewer discretion is advised. The wind rustled softly outside the window, brushing against the glass like a secret trying to get in. Elena stood at the kitchen sink, hands immersed in warm soapy water, watching the sun dip behind the trees. Her home was peaceful, a kind of stillness she used to treasure. But recently, that stillness felt different. She dried her hands and glanced at the clock. 6:45 p.m. Ryan would be home any minute now. Her stepson, just turned 18, had been her responsibility ever since his mother died nearly 8 years ago. Elena had done her best to raise him right, loved him like her own when David, her husband, was too lost in work or grief to notice. The front door creaked open. "I'm home," Ryan called out. In the kitchen, she replied, voice cheerful but taut. He walked in, backpack slung lazily over one shoulder, a little taller now, broader. His features had matured faster than she remembered, sharp jaw, messy hair, intense eyes that lingered just a beat too long. He smiled as he saw her. "You cooked lasagna?" "My favorite," he grinned. She smiled, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. "Of course. You had a long week." They sat down to eat. It felt normal. But somewhere between the laughter and the clinking forks, she noticed his eyes traveling to the neckline of her blouse. It was quick. A flash. But not missed. She cleared her throat and stood to get more salad. "So, any plans for the weekend?" "Not really," Ryan replied. "I kinda like being here. With you." Elena froze for half a second before forcing a polite smile. "That's sweet. But don't you want to hang out with friends?" He shrugged. "They don't get me like you do." The comment echoed louder than it should have. She laughed nervously and changed the subject, asking about school. But his eyes, those intense, searching eyes, remained fixed on her. Not like a son looking at a mother. Like a man studying a woman. That night, while walking to her bedroom, she passed by Ryan's door. It was slightly ajar. Inside, he was asleep, or so it seemed. Then she heard it, a whisper so low it barely reached her. "Elena," she froze. Had she imagined it? She leaned closer. His eyes were shut. Breathing even. He looked peaceful. Just a boy in bed. She shook her head and walked away, heart pounding for reasons she didn't understand, or maybe didn't want to. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering how many times she told herself their bond was pure. How many times she reminded herself that he was her son, even if not by blood. But something had shifted in the air. Something fragile had cracked. And Elena, deep down, knew this was only the beginning. Elena stood in front of the bathroom mirror the next morning, staring at her own reflection with tired, questioning eyes. Her chest felt heavy. The night before kept replaying in her mind, Ryan whispering her name, that haunting moment outside his room, the lingering look at dinner. She told herself it was all in her head. Teenagers go through strange phases. Maybe he was dreaming. Maybe she was being paranoid. But something inside her said otherwise. She dressed carefully that day, choosing a more conservative blouse, buttoned to the collar. Her heart wasn't in it, though. The discomfort wasn't just about what she wore. It was the way Ryan had started looking at her, as if he saw her as something more than just a mother figure. As she walked downstairs, she heard the sound of the television and Ryan laughing. That same warm, familiar laugh that used to make her smile. But this time, it filled her with a sense of unease. She tried to shake it off. "Morning," he called, looking up from the couch. "You look nice today." "Thanks," she replied quickly, avoiding eye contact. They sat for breakfast in silence. A strange tension hung between them like an invisible string pulled tight. Every movement, every glance, felt louder than usual. At one point, Ryan reached across the table to pass her the syrup, and his fingers lightly brushed hers. Elena pulled her hand back a little too quickly. He noticed. "You okay?" he asked, eyes narrowing. Yeah, she lied. Just tired. Ryan leaned back in his chair, watching her. You've been different lately. Distant. She swallowed. I'm just thinking about a lot. Later that afternoon, she heard footsteps behind her while folding laundry in the guest room. Ryan stood at the doorway, shirtless, a towel draped over his shoulder. Elena, he said softly, can I ask you something? Of course, she replied without looking at him, her hands trembling slightly as she folded a towel. Do you ever feel like you're pretending? He asked. She turned, confused. Pretending what? That everything is normal. When it's not. Her breath caught. Their eyes met. And for a second, something unspoken passed between them, something raw and dangerously honest. She broke the stare, placing the towel down and stepping past him. Ryan, I think you're going through a confusing time, she said, voice careful. You've been through a lot, and it's okay to have strong emotions, but what if what I feel is real? He interrupted, voice low and steady. Elena turned sharply. You're my son, Ryan. This isn't okay. These are lines we don't cross. He didn't argue. He just stared at her with a storm behind his eyes, like he was begging her to admit she felt it too. Elena walked away, locking herself in her room, her heart pounding like a drum. She didn't know what scared her more, what Ryan was feeling, or the part of her that wasn't entirely sure she wanted to stop it. Elena found herself constantly on edge. What used to be a normal weekday routine now felt like walking a tightrope. Every interaction with Ryan carried a strange weight, as if they were both tiptoeing around something unspoken. The air in the house had changed. It wasn't just tense, it was charged. She started locking her bedroom door at night. Not because she thought Ryan would do anything. At least, that's what she told herself. But because deep down, she feared what might happen if he did. One evening, as she stepped out of the shower, wrapped in a towel, she opened the bathroom door, and there he was. Ryan, standing in the hallway, his eyes wide. Sorry, he said quickly, but he didn't move. Ryan, she said firmly, pulling her towel tighter, you can't be out here like this. I just forgot to grab my charger, he mumbled. She walked past him, not turning back. But she felt his gaze on her like a burn on her skin. Later that night, she found a folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter. It was from Ryan. You said once that I should always speak from the heart. Well, my heart is telling me I feel something for you I can't explain. And I know it's wrong. But it feels more real than anything else in my life. Elena sat down slowly, rereading the note as her fingers trembled. Her mind screamed no, but her heart ached. This wasn't a child's crush anymore. This was an emotional storm that had been building for months, maybe years. And she had been part of it. The next day, she decided to talk to him seriously. Ryan, she said, sitting him down in the living room, this has to stop. Whatever you're feeling, it's not healthy. I'm your stepmother. But you're the only one who listens to me, he said quietly. The only one who understands. You're young. Confused. These feelings, they'll pass. He didn't respond. Instead, he looked down and nodded like a child being scolded. But his silence carried defiance. That weekend, David left for another trip. Elena tried to keep her distance. She busied herself with chores, stayed in her room, and barely looked Ryan in the eyes. But it wasn't enough. On Sunday night, as she was cleaning up after dinner, Ryan came up behind her and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Just a simple touch, but it sent a jolt through her. I'm sorry, he whispered. I just miss how we used to be. She froze. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then, finally, she turned and stepped away, wiping her hands on a towel. Go to bed, Ryan. He stared at her, lips parted like he wanted to say more, but then he nodded and walked away. Elena collapsed into a chair the moment he was out of sight. Her throat burned. The house was quiet, but inside her heart, a storm was gaining strength. And she didn't know if she was strong enough to survive it. The storm outside had arrived without warning. Sheets of rain battered the windows, and thunder cracked like an angry voice from the sky. Elena lit a few candles around the living room. The power had gone out almost an hour ago. She texted David to let him know they were okay, but as usual, his reply was brief and delayed. He was hundreds of miles away, caught up in work, in meetings, in a world that felt farther every day. She sat on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders. The flickering candlelight danced across the room, casting long shadows. That eerie sense of silence had returned. The only sound was the rain and the occasional low rumble of thunder shaking the windows. Ryan came into the room quietly. He had changed into sweatpants and a hoodie, his hair still damp from the shower. "You okay?" he asked. Elena nodded. "Just tired. Storms make me uneasy." He hesitated, then walked over and sat beside her. "Close, but not too close. You used to tell me it was okay to be scared," he said softly. "Back when I had nightmares." She smiled faintly. "You were a little boy then." "I'm not anymore," he replied, not looking at her. There was a long pause. The kind that holds too much meaning. "I can sleep downstairs tonight," he offered, gesturing toward the couch. "I know you don't like being alone during storms." She hesitated. He noticed. "You don't have to be afraid of me," he added gently. "I'm not," she lied. They watched the storm in silence. Eventually, she got up and brought him an extra blanket and pillow. "Good night, Ryan," she said firmly. "Good night, Elena," he replied. She paused at that. Not mom. Not even stepmom. Just Elena. Hours passed. She tossed and turned in bed, the storm growing louder. Every flash of lightning lit up the corners of her room. Her thoughts raced. She hated this feeling of being watched, of being wanted in a way she never asked for. And yet, some dark, broken part of her wasn't running. At around 2 a.m., she stirred awake. She heard footsteps. Light ones. Before she could react, her bedroom door creaked open slowly. "Ryan," she whispered. He stepped inside, barefoot, his voice low. "I can't sleep. You shouldn't be in here." "I know." She sat up, the blanket clutched tightly around her chest. "I miss you," he said, not moving any closer. "I'm right here." "No, you're not," he said softly. "Not like before." His voice cracked. Then he said it, the line that hit her like a wave of guilt and longing. "My son, it's all right. Just go with the flow." It was her voice, her words, something she'd once whispered to comfort him years ago. But hearing it now, mirrored back at her, made her skin crawl. Tears welled in her eyes. "You need to leave this room. Right now." He didn't argue. He just stared, heartbroken, then turned and walked away. Elena sat there for hours, unmoving, her world shattered by a single sentence, spoken by the boy she raised, and the man he was becoming. Elena didn't sleep for the rest of the night. She sat on the edge of her bed, her hands clutching her knees, her eyes wide and dry. Her heart felt like it had cracked open, and inside was nothing but shame, confusion, and fear. What happened that night hadn't been physical. No touch. No kiss. No act. But something far deeper had taken place. A boundary had been crossed, and she had let it happen. When the morning came, the storm had passed. Sunlight poured through the blinds, as if mocking her inner chaos. The house was silent. She walked downstairs like a ghost, still wrapped in the robe she'd worn all night. Ryan was in the kitchen, humming quietly as he poured himself a bowl of cereal. He looked up and smiled. "Morning." Elena froze. That smile, so casual, so ordinary. As if nothing had happened. As if the line between mother and something else hadn't been completely blurred just hours ago. She didn't return the smile. She turned around and walked straight into the bathroom, locking the door behind her. There, she broke. She sank to the floor, tears finally coming. Silent, choking sobs she'd been holding in for days. She hated herself. Hated that she hadn't screamed at him. Hated that she hadn't told David. Hated that a part of her, however small, had felt needed. That day, she barely spoke a word. She stayed in her room, only emerging for a moment to ask Ryan to give her some space. He nodded, looking wounded, but said nothing. David called that evening. She didn't answer. The next few days passed like fog. Elena avoided eye contact. She left the kitchen when Ryan entered. She skipped meals. Her guilt consumed her, whispering cruel things in her ear. You led him on. You didn't stop him soon enough. You liked the attention. On the fourth night, Ryan knocked on her bedroom door. Elena. His voice was soft. Are you mad at me? She didn't answer. I didn't mean to mess anything up, he continued. I feel so close to you. And when you shut me out like this, I don't know who I am. She sat in silence, tears streaming down her cheeks. Please say something, he whispered. She finally stood, opened the door just enough to look at him. I need time, she said, her voice low and cracked. And you need help, Ryan. We both do. He looked away, nodding slowly. Okay. He walked down the hall without another word. Elena closed the door, pressing her forehead against the wood. She knew she couldn't keep this up much longer. Something had to give. She had to tell David or talk to anyone. Because the silence was no longer protecting anyone. It was destroying them both. David returned on a Thursday evening, suitcase in hand and exhaustion written all over his face. Elena stood in the kitchen, her body stiff as she watched him walk through the door. For a moment, she wanted to collapse into his arms, to tell him everything, to beg for his forgiveness even before she spoke a word. But she didn't. She just said, "Hi," and forced a smile. "Hey," he replied, setting his bag down. "How are you? You look tired." She nodded. "It's been a rough week." Ryan appeared at the top of the stairs. "Dad," he said, surprised. David smiled. "There's my boy." They embraced, and something in Elena twisted. The guilt grew heavier, pressing against her chest like a vice. That night, after dinner, David sat in the study catching up on work. Elena moved quietly around the house, restless, unsettled. Ryan had gone to bed early, and the house felt strangely split in half, David in one room, Ryan in another, and Elena stuck somewhere in between. Later, while putting away laundry in Ryan's room, David found a folded paper tucked inside a textbook. It wasn't hidden well, almost like someone wanted it to be found. He unfolded it and read, "I know this can't be right, but she makes me feel alive. She sees me. I can't pretend it's not real anymore. I don't want to." David stared at the paper, frozen. The handwriting was unmistakably Ryan's. He walked into their bedroom without knocking, holding the note. "What the hell is this, Elena?" She looked up from her book, heart thudding. "What?" He tossed the note onto the bed. "You tell me." She picked it up and read it slowly, her throat tightening with every word. I didn't know he wrote that," she whispered. "But it's about you, isn't it?" he snapped, voice low and dangerous. "What is going on?" Elena sat on the edge of the bed, her face pale. "David, it's complicated. Make it simple." She closed her eyes. Ryan's been confused. He started acting differently, getting attached. Emotionally. David's voice cracked. "Elena, he's our son." "He's not mine," she said quickly, then immediately regretted it. The silence after that was unbearable. "He's not yours," David repeated coldly. "But he trusted you." "And you what?" "Entertain this." "I never touched him," she said, her voice trembling. "But yes. I ignored the signs too long. I didn't stop him the way I should have." David paced the room, running a hand through his hair. "You should have told me the second this started," he said, eyes burning with betrayal. "I know," she whispered. "But I was scared. I didn't know how." Their argument continued, voices rising and falling. Neither of them noticed Ryan standing at the end of the hallway, listening. His face was pale. His eyes filled with shame and panic. He turned slowly, walked downstairs, and slipped out the front door. By the time David and Elena realized he was gone, it was too late. Rain had started again, soft and persistent, as if the sky was mourning along with her. Elena stood at the front door in her robe, staring out into the dark street. Ryan was gone. His shoes were missing from the rack. His phone lay on the hallway table. He hadn't taken a jacket. "Where would he go?" she said aloud, her voice shaky. David didn't answer. He was already on the phone with the local police, reporting a runaway. The fury from their argument had been replaced by something heavier: fear. "He heard us," Elena whispered. "He must have heard everything." David hung up and stared at her. "Good." She looked at him, startled. He needs to understand the damage he's caused, David continued. And you need to understand that I don't know who you are anymore. His words stung more than she expected. But she didn't respond. She couldn't. All she could think about was Ryan alone, ashamed, out there somewhere blaming himself for everything. A few agonizing hours passed before the phone rang. It was the police. Ryan had been found sitting alone at a park bench near the edge of town. They said he was quiet, cold, and looked like he hadn't slept in days. When they brought him home, Elena's heart nearly stopped at the sight of him. His eyes were sunken, clothes damp, lips pale. He didn't look like the boy she raised. He looked like someone who had given up. "Ryan," she whispered, rushing to him. He looked at her, then down. "I'm sorry." David stepped forward. "Go upstairs, Ryan. We'll talk later." Ryan paused. "Can I talk to her first?" David hesitated, then walked away in silence. Elena guided Ryan into the living room. He sat on the couch, his body trembling slightly. "I ruined everything," he said. "No," Elena replied gently. "We both let things go too far." "I didn't mean to fall in love with you," he said, his voice cracking. I didn't know how to stop." Tears filled her eyes. "You didn't fall in love, Ryan. You were looking for comfort, for stability. You were grieving your mother, your childhood, and I became the place you escaped to. But I felt something real," he whispered. "I know," she said, her voice steady. "But real doesn't always mean right." He covered his face with his hands. "I'm disgusting." "No, you're not," she said firmly. "You're hurting. And confused. And you need help." She reached for his hand. "You're still my son, whether by blood or not. And I still love you. But we have to fix this. Separately." He nodded slowly, silent tears falling. David stood in the hallway, listening. His face was unreadable. But something in him softened. That night, the three of them didn't sleep. They didn't know what healing would look like, or if it would ever come. But for the first time, the truth had been spoken out loud. And that was the first step toward whatever came next. 2 months had passed since the night everything came crashing down. The house no longer echoed with tension, but with absence. Ryan had moved in with his grandparents on David's side, hundreds of miles away in a quiet, coastal town. It was for the best. He needed space. They all did. Elena now lived in a house filled with quiet regrets. She and David had separated, though not legally divorced, at least not yet. He had moved into a small apartment downtown, staying in contact for Ryan's sake, but emotionally, he had drifted far beyond her reach. She often wondered if they could have survived the storm had she acted sooner, had she drawn clearer lines, said harder truths, refused to let loneliness blur her role in Ryan's life. But she didn't. And now she was left with the consequences. Every morning, Elena made a cup of coffee and sat by the window, staring out at the empty street. It had become her routine. She thought of Ryan constantly, not with longing, but with a deep, aching concern. Was he doing okay? Was he healing? Was he blaming her, or worse, hating himself? One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was from Ryan. Her hands shook as she opened the envelope. "Elena, I wasn't sure if I should write. I didn't even know if you'd want to hear from me. But I needed to say some things I didn't get the chance to say properly. Thank you for raising me when no one else did. For loving me when I was broken. For not turning your back on me, even when I crossed a line I never should have. I'm getting help. Therapy is weird, but it's helping. I'm learning that what I felt wasn't really love, it was desperation. And I confused your kindness for something else. That wasn't your fault. But I know I made it your burden. I'm sorry. I hope you're okay. And I hope one day David will find peace too. We all made mistakes. But I don't hate you. I don't hate anyone. I just want to be better. Thank you for everything. Love, Ryan." Tears fell freely from Elena's eyes as she finished reading. She walked over to her desk, pulled out a pen and a blank sheet of paper, and began to write her reply. "Ryan, you are not a mistake. You're a human being learning how to survive pain, just like the rest of us. I forgive you. And I hope one day you can forgive me too. Be gentle with yourself. And know, you will always be loved. Elena." She folded the letter and sealed it with a deep breath. It wouldn't fix everything. It wouldn't erase the past. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, healing starts with the courage to write the truth down, even if your voice is shaking. 91.